Hey, listen, I understand this video is pretty long, but I really wanted to talk about why I think the 2020 election is likely to be the most important election of our lifetimes. More than just the presidency, the very existence of our democracy is going to be on the ballot. And I know that sounds a little bit dramatic, but if you haven't clicked away yet, I really hope you'll give me the chance to explain why I think that. So, to do that, it's important to recognize that what we're seeing in terms of the craziness in politics nowadays didn't start with Trump. Politicians on both sides have gerrymandered, lied, abused their power throughout history, but it's the trend that's been building within the Republican Party since roughly the 70s that's particularly alarming. What they've been doing is playing up hot button issues that they do not care about as a way to distract from important issues to them that are unpopular with the general public. The perfect example of this is abortion. Back in the day, evangelical Christians weren't politically active at all, and they actually didn't care about abortion either.
Before Roe, evangelicals were more or less indifferent to abortion.
In fact, the Southern Baptist Convention passed a resolution calling for the legalization of abortion, a resolution they reaffirmed in 1974, the year after Roe v. Wade, and again in 1976.
However, this was a numerous, passionate group, so Republicans searched for an issue that could galvanize them to be politically active on their side.
A conservative political activist named Paul Weyrich was trying really hard to grow the Republican Party base.
And he's the person who understood the electoral potential of white evangelicals, and he set out to mobilize them. I was reading through Weyrich's papers, midterm election 1978, and it's almost like the papers begin to sizzle because Weyrich said, I found it. This is the issue that's going to work for us in order to mobilize grassroots evangelical voters.
After years of searching for the perfect issue, Weyrich was convinced that the issue that would mobilize evangelicals into a voting bloc for the Republican Party was abortion.
They just knew that if they could convince people that the other side was literally voting to kill babies, it wouldn't matter what other policies they pushed. They could win support by saving the babies and get away with anything else they wanted to get away with. Now, once this proved to be an effective method, they began employing it in increasingly drastic ways over the years. Fox News burst onto the scene as a wing of the Republican Party and really took it to the next level. And I know people like to say that Fox is the counterweight to organizations like CNN and MSNBC, but I think Jon Stewart actually addressed that quite perfectly about 10 years ago in an interview with Chris Wallace.
Yes, I do.
Over the years, you have called us, and we're going to put this on the screen because this is heavy stuff. A biased organization relentlessly promoting an ideological agenda under the rubric of being a news organization.
Rubric.
And, yeah, I actually think was slightly the wrong use of the word rubric.
Was it really?
A relentless, agenda-driven, 24-hour news opinion propaganda delivery system.
Yeah.
Where do you come up with this stuff?
It's actually quite easy when you feel it. You got to feel it in your soul, you know.
Well, here's the deal. Are you willing to say the same thing about the mainstream media, about ABC, CBS, NBC, Washington Post, New York Times? Would you say the same thing about them, that they are, in your words, a propaganda delivery system relentlessly pushing a liberal agenda?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Why not?
The bias of the mainstream media is towards sensationalism, conflict, and laziness.
What he was saying there is that Fox is an activist organization working actively with the Republican Party, while networks like NBC and CNN are sensationalist and lazy, and they do have a liberal bias, but they're not actively coordinating with the party. And that's a big difference. In any case, despite the expanded amount of fear-mongering on issues like immigration and guns, Obama won re-election in 2012 after years of these practices. And when this anti-democratic strategy failed them in this huge way, they were forced to look inwards. Reince Priebus, who was chair of the RNC at the time, released a report with his suggestions for the future of the party. And it was an incredibly frank assessment about how the party was overly reliant on old white males to maintain power, And that demographic, they knew, is shrinking as an overall percentage of America's population. In the report, Priebus said that by the year 2050, we will be a majority-minority country, and in both 2008 and 2012, President Obama won a combined 80% of the votes of all minority groups, end quote. This was a recognition of the direction that the country was going, and it was an attempt to make the party evolve so that it could become more inclusive and stay relevant. But unfortunately, many in the far right saw things in a different way. Sean Trend, who writes for a far-right news organization, wrote an influential series about the missing white voters, and he was basically rebutting the demographic arguments of the GOP report, saying that Republicans could still build a reliable coalition solely by picking up some downscale white voters, instead of embracing policies like immigration reform, which they were considering at the time as a way to capture votes from immigrants. So basically what happened was the Republican Party was faced with an existential decision. It could either embrace change and invite more people in, or seclude itself, double down on its base of white voters, and engage in voter suppression to hold on to power as a minority. And sadly, they went really hard for option number 2. And then once the decision was made, they resorted to even more fear-mongering to keep their base in line.
The president is selling class warfare.
Is there a growing anti-white people movement in America?
The feds and many state governments are working hard to take away your guns.
Meanwhile, they'll take your money.
The invasion of illegal immigrants.
We have terrorists crossing the Mexican border.
Singled out for its Christian message.
We can pick on white guys, we can pick on Christians in this country.
Food stamp abusers feeding on taxpayers.
The United States of entitlement. They're stealing our money, and the taxpayers should rise up.
We are under a tyranny now.
All hail King Obama.
An imperial president.
America's freedom is slipping away.
America's best days are behind her.
America, you have a choice to make.
It is time that we take our country back.
You need to get angry. Our worst fears might very well be here.
They effectively convinced their base that poor people and immigrants were the cause of all their problems, just to name a couple. Now, most Republican leaders don't actually believe those things. They just wanted to use that narrative as a way to hold on to power. Again, scare people about something you don't care about, get them to vote for you, you can get away with what you want. But then, someone showed up that actually believed and promoted all the craziness that they had been pushing as a side hustle up until that point.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. Written by a nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. I want surveillance of certain mosques, okay?
You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the do anything.
Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like
Trump represented the culmination of all the fear and hysteria that Republicans had been stirring up over the last few decades. And as he burst onto the scene, Republicans recognized him as the real threat that he is. So they tried to rein it in.
Chief, you know how you make America great again? Tell Donald Trump to go to hell. Donald Trump is the most unelectable Republican I've seen in my lifetime. He's not fit to be president of the United States. The Republican Party has been kind here, bringing out the worst in us. Disparaged women, opportunistic, religious bigotry, race baiting, xenophobia. He's a jackass.
But it was too little, too late. Trump won, and they realized after that the best way for them to hold on to their own power would be to embrace him, no matter how absurd he became.
Jackass. No, I don't think he's a xenophobic, race-baiting, religious bigot. I like the president. I want to help him. I hope he's successful. You know what concerns me about the American press is this endless attempt to label the guy as some kind of kook, not fit to be president.
Trump's strategy is very effective. What he does is flood the airwaves with provable lies to overwhelm us. Then we want to care, but there's just so much happening. We don't know how to make sense of it. And the media makes us feel like the sky is falling, but most of us don't actually feel these day-to-day effects. And so while they're freaking out, we just have anxiety and decide to turn out to save ourselves the stress. All that's to say, Trump has implemented an incredibly successful blitz campaign intended to make us feel overwhelmed to the point that we stop paying attention. If you're trying to sell lies to people, it's a lot easier to get away with it if less of them actually pay attention. With so many people checking out, that means less people you need to convince of your narrative. This makes Fox News crucially important once again. Roger Ailes, the founder of Fox, famously said that Nixon would have gotten away with Watergate if he had Fox News at the time. With enough people sufficiently exhausted and another large portion of the population getting all of their information through a filter that pushes whatever Republicans are saying, they're hoping they can get away with literally anything they want. And they just might. Now, I understand that when life is generally going okay, you have a job, it's hard to find the motivation to care about things like this. So what if the president lies a lot? Feels like our vote doesn't matter, and things do tend to work out in the end. But I would remind the over 100 million Americans who didn't vote in 2016, or the Republicans of conscience who know that we should be better than this and voted for Trump anyways, that there is no guarantee that our democracy can handle this level of abuse. In the scheme of things, America is still very young. Humans have been around for quite a long time, and there have been countless communities, kingdoms, and empires that rose to prominence with the belief that they would be there forever. Ancient Egypt lasted 550 years, and ancient Rome lasted for 1,000, before both civilizations fell, and their stories faded into history books and Wikipedia pages that most people will never read. The United States, by comparison, has been around for 243 years. There is no divine intervention that makes our leaders obey our laws. So here is the point. Our laws and democratic norms only matter when the citizens of this country decide to believe that they matter. What's on the ballot in 2020 is not just 4 years of craziness under Trump. If Trump wins, it sends a signal to him, the Republican Party, and all future politicians that the most effective way to win and hold power is to cheat the system. If that happens, Republicans will continue down this path until our laws do not mean anything and the system will collapse. However, if we deliver a resounding defeat of not only Trump but the Republican Party, even as they blatantly try to cheat the system, that will be the proof that the absurdity they've embraced isn't worth it, and they'll be forced to look inwards again. Demographics in America are continuing to evolve in Democrats' favor. After 2020, Republicans will either continue down this path of undermining our laws and institutions to hold on to power, or they will evolve and return to a degree of good faith conservative representation. Now, in a normal democracy, it's better to choose the candidate you like the most regardless of their party. But the outcome of the 2020 election will decide whether Republicans reform their ways or continue down this path. So it's up to voters to show them they will not stand for this level of abuse to our system. I personally support Pete Buttigieg for president, but I will fight with literally everything I have for whoever our candidate is, and I'll be voting blue up and down the ballot. I hope you'll join me.